I'm getting complaints because they didn't, as one of my chatters, Toblerone says, I didn't sign up for this friendship. I want blood.
Oh, okay.
So, so I guess we have to start being mean to each other. Let me pull up this article
Well, we
real quick.
are. I mean, we're like gladiators here. Okay, we can keep it cool. We're not in the arena yet. Like, uh,
Yeah,
as soon as we
yeah.
as soon as we throw open the doors and the lions come out, it's time to fight.
Are you not entertained?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What did I do? I accidentally clicked on something. There we go. Okay. Can everybody see this okay?
Maybe I should.
Um,
Maybe I should try to pull it up in another window. I'm not sure if I can
it,
do that, but you just read it and I'll respond. How about that?
okay. This is a Vice article, the seven types of atheists. We spoke to philosopher John Gray about the many different forms of atheists that exist today and why the majority of them suck.
Hmm.
Okay, we're kind of poisoning the well a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah. Does that hurt? I mean, I was thinking the same thing. Like he's out for blood immediately. I was going to ask you
Yeah.
just for an intro that I think might be helpful. One of the things that I'm super into is moral psychology. Have you studied any moral psychology? Do you know? Have you read like Jonathan Haidt or any of the? Uh,
I've watched a few Jonathan Haidt lectures. I would be a layman. I wouldn't say that I'm completely ignorant, but I would definitely be a layman. I'm not,
yes.
not an expert by any means.
So there's a real simple idea in moral psychology that kind of affected the way that I look at anything. And it's this idea that moral communities form around a sacred idea. So we're looking at an article where they're talking about seven types of atheists. And
Hmm.
I immediately want to look at it through that moral psychology lens just because it's so helpful. I look at political parties in the same way. Like any group that forms and is going to moralize about different things usually has an overarching goal to that community. They have a
Hmm.
sacred value that they're building their community on. They're really building their ethic on. And every other value is subservient to that guiding ethic. So when I look at communities, I usually try to figure out what the guiding ethic was. I think I asked you before we had this conversation about whether or not you believe the world would be a better place without religion. That's kind of the
Hmm.
guiding ethic that I use to distinguish an anti-theist from an atheist. Like I myself am an atheist, obviously, but I'm a pro Christianity atheist. I'm a pro I grew up Christian. I understand it. So it's
Yeah.
hard for me to be anti Christian. I do, like you, I have critiques of Christianity. I think there are places that Christianity gets it wrong, specifically like LGBT rights and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I think you and I would probably agree on those things. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of that Christianity does get right. So I think the atheist community has a powerful goal to transform Christianity, and I think that's a good thing. I
That
just don't
seems
necessarily.
like, yeah, that seems like it should be your goal too,
Well,
right? Because why not take the good and discard the bad? Why not, adopt what's good about it, which this article seems to be explicitly against,
mhm.
and then and then discard the bad, the blatantly false aspects of Christianity, this creator God, you know,
So we've
the,
shifted. I agree
mhm,
with you. So we're in agreement on the mission to separate the good and the bad.
mhm.
But we're going to differ on what we think the good and the bad is. I think we agree that the anti-LGBT stuff is bad. You agree with that, correct?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, so we're in agreement there. But then you're also going to say believing untrue things is bad. I would assume.
Well, yeah,
Okay, well
yeah.
I disagree on that. So
Okay.
that's where a point of contention will
Well,
be.
how can you say that and expect people to trust you?
Oh, oh, that's an interesting point I hadn't really considered, but elaborate. Can you elaborate for me?
Well, if you don't value the truth,
Mm-hmm.
then you would be more willing to lie, wouldn't you? Or be willing to perpetuate falsehoods?
Well,
I mean,
I can be honest as an individual, like I am honest. I'm saying, I'm an atheist. I don't believe there is a God. I have the utmost respect for religious people who believe something else, but I'm not trying to uh, dissuade them from their own personal beliefs. So is that a
mhm.
dishonest position?
Not if you don't care about it. I mean, I can understand not giving a damn one way or the other. But if you want to actively promote it and you know it's not true, then I think you have to justify it. Like, it's not always wrong. I mean, the old example everyone always gives is if you're in World War II and you're hiding Jews in your basement, is it okay to lie to the Nazi who comes along and asks if you're hiding Jews? Obviously, most people would say that yes, it's moral. That's a moral lie. Tell the Nazi you're not hiding anybody, right?
I agree.
Um, so so is that kind of like how you would that be like a steel man of your position where you think that Christianity is a moral lie?
Well, you're framing it, and this is a lot of my detractors frame it as I am promoting Christianity whole cloth, and I am saying I'm against the anti-LGBT stuff in Christianity. So obviously, I'm not promoting it whole cloth. I am
Mm-hmm.
pro the forgiveness aspects of Christianity. I feel like
Yeah, me too.
in order to make a modern society work, something social psychologists call a dignity culture, you have to foster forgiveness. And I don't necessarily know how to foster forgiveness in the culture without something like Christianity. I use the example of Christmas a lot. Like, it's also good in modern society to foster generosity. Christmas has become kind of a secular holiday, but it still fosters generosity without all of the religious baggage that goes along with it. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
that's possible for forgiveness in the same way it is with generosity, because forgiveness is a much higher bar. If you're going to ask people to forgive other individuals, I mean, it's as it is. Human nature wants revenge, wants vengeance, wants justice. Uh,
Now, I'm kind of I see that's one of the many contradictions that I see in Christianity, of which there's many. I see
mhm.
many contradictions in the religion itself, but one of the main contradictions I see is this battle between vengeance and forgiveness. Now, I admire the forgiveness aspect of the religion. I value forgiveness. I don't think it's exclusive to Christianity, but I do think that Christianity definitely promotes it, and or at least there's many Christians who promote it. But there's another aspect of Christianity that's very bloodthirsty. The hell and brimstone Christianity, your enemies are going to be tortured for an eternity Christianity. That Christianity is very vengeful. And I think that our justice system itself is predicated upon those beliefs. And I
I
think that I want to move towards a justice system that is more rooted in rehabilitation and forgiveness and redemption, which also finds themes in Christianity, and kind of move away from this fire and brimstone, revenge, vengeance form of justice, which says, let's lock them up and, treat them like animals, and yes, death penalty. And, I, you see, you see
I
that a lot
agree.
on the conservative, on the right, on Christian right, on the conservative side, you see more tendency toward that. Whereas nowadays, when we're talking about police reform and prison reform, we are talking about rehabilitation, a focus on education and prevention and forgiveness rather than just brutal punishment, you know?
So you can use Christianity to teach a number of different things. And I think this is where, an honest critique of the Bible is that it's contradictory. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of theists, I would say more fundamentalists will argue for a literal interpretation of the Bible, but I don't see a lot of Christians arguing for a literal interpretation of the Bible. Sometimes I feel like it's a position that the anti-theists put on Christians when they're not necessarily biblical literalists.
I mean, it's a lot of that thought is parochial.
Mm-hmm.
People from England, or people from up north in New England, they don't see that as much. Down here in the American South, you see it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that, people don't, there's people where that view is very alien to them. If you're up in Canada, you might not see very many fundamentalist Christians, but down in the American South, you do. And a lot of these people that end up in our government do as well. Or at the very least, they pander to them.
Yeah.
And that's a concern of mine.
So I think you understand the basic concept of the moral psychology. Do you want to move back to the article? You want to go through some of these examples?
Oh, yeah.
If you have any questions for me too, feel free to ask, obviously.
Okay. So, all right, we start off a little bit contentious here, a little bit poisoning the well. And then we go on, not believing in God has always seemed perfectly sensible to me, but also a bit of a tedious thing to discuss. Of course, that hasn't stopped the so-called new atheists like Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and Sam Harris, and their annoyingly fanatical online acolytes, I guess that would be me, banging on about exactly what they don't believe in all the time. I get this all the time. Why don't you talk about stuff you don't believe in all the time? And I think the picture that they chose to represent the article kind of perfectly encapsulates why. They chose this picture because it's a guy standing there with a sign that says there is no God. And that's the subject of the picture. He's standing right in the middle. But look at the context. He's got his little sign that he just haphazardly made out of shit that he found lying around. He's got a piece of cardboard that he scribbled "There is no God" on, and he's standing there because there's a whole group of preachers, with loudspeakers and prefabricated, professionally designed, printed signs, probably yelling about fire and brimstone and whatever. And he's a response to that. Like, if they weren't there, he wouldn't be there either. If Christians weren't involving themselves in my life and in the lives of others, then I wouldn't be involving myself in theirs. He calls it a tedious thing. The new atheists are so tedious. I mean, like, we're talking about shit that people have talked about for thousands of years. You have Christians who go to church every single Sunday, talk about tedium. All we're doing is engaging in the discussion. And it is a tedious discussion, but that's the nature of the religion, which we are just responding to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. But you also have a message that you're proselytizing. This is my contention with anti-theists, because the message is the world would be a better place without religion. I specifically asked you about that. That's true, right? You believe the world would be a better place without religion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
And your videos are proselytizing that message. The world would be a better place without religion. How do you know that you're right?
Well, when we see, as we have seen the trends of the last couple hundred years, I mean, we've seen religion decline. We've seen secular countries rise, like, I mean, never, like they never have in history. I hate sounding like Trump. That just sounded like Trump. We've seen atheist societies rise like never before. Believe me, this has never happened before. No, but we do. Look at Canada and New Zealand and what Scandinavia. Britain. These countries are losing their religions. Meanwhile, the third world remains extremely religious. Religion is not saving the third world. You know what I mean?
Well, I have another way of looking at that too, because this is a popular argument that the anti-theists will make. They will say that less religious countries are more prosperous.
Right.
Now, I think they get the causal connection wrong. I think they get it backwards. More successful countries are less religious because of wealth. They have wealth, and therefore the population turns away from religious. They become more irreligious because the tangible needs in their lives are being met by society and the institutions. Like if you have universal health care, you have good colleges, you have a functioning police system, a functioning court for regress of grievances, you're less likely to need religion to fill those psychological necessities in people. So as soon as
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
So as soon as a nation as soon as things turn bad, and people are questioning now if we're on the verge of that. People are rioting in the streets. There's been like a riot in Portland, I guess, for 50 days. Tim Pool, who you brought up in your thing, is we're on the verge of a Civil War video every day.
He's always,
yeah, exactly.
Always does that, though.
Exactly. So,
but yeah, and if things do decline, I fully expect to see a religious revival.
Okay, so we're in agreement there.
Yeah.
So if you're using the fact that wealthier countries are less religious as evidence that religion,
as evidence that we don't need religion to make the world a better place. We don't need religion to live in a good, peaceful, happy world.
Right, but it doesn't make the case that the world would be a better place without religion, because I think
that the world being a better place will naturally cause religion to dissipate, and necessarily would be a world without religion would necessarily pretty much have to be a better place, because that's just the nature of the beast. That's what reality shows us.
But there are cases like the Soviet Union and Maoist China where they were totally irreligious and the world turned into a really shitty place.
Well, I don't think that is that didn't occur by way of just a natural process. That was imposed, and I'm against that. I'm against forcing people to be a certain way. I favor freedom of religion, right? Like those people, who's to say they were really atheists? Like they would not have been allowed to practice their religion, right? But that doesn't make them atheists. That makes them oppressed religious people.
Right.
So are we really talking about their sincere beliefs here, or are we talking about an oppressive dictatorial regime that imposed atheism on everybody, which I am 100% against? Or are we talking about a society, a free society, that became prosperous and shed its religion as a natural consequence of what happens when people aren't grieving all the time and need to cling to religion all the time. We're talking about the latter.
The latter. The latter, yeah, the latter I'm fine with, obviously. I'm just examining the claim that anti-theists are making. They're making a claim. They're saying the world would be a better place without religion. And I don't necessarily buy into that claim. I think religion has given us a capitalist society that has made a lot of people wealthy, and that wealthiness has made them more irreligious. But I think all of that could go away and people would immediately become more religious.
But how do you link the religion to capitalism?
The Protestant work ethic, I think, is part of our capitalist system. Part of the reason why we're what creates wealth in the modern world. Also, equal protection under the law is kind of an idea that everyone is the same in the eyes of God. That was a recent adaptation with Martin Luther, with the Martin Luther Protestant movement. Before that, with the Catholics, the idea that everyone was equal in the eyes of God wasn't really a thing. Like there was, God had favorites.
But didn't they have capitalism back then? I mean, people were bartering. There was an idea of labor for compensation.
Sure. Yeah.
And markets. All that stuff existed before Christianity too. Ancient Rome. I mean, right?
Well, the two have kind of evolved together over time. The capitalist system has evolved with the religious system. Yes, very much so. The adaptation that the United States made, which I think is a great one, is the separation of church and state. The idea that you could have multiple groups of people living together with different religions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go back to the article?
Sure. Before we get on too much of a tangent here.
Well, no, it's fine. I mean, if you have questions or.
Okay. All right. Let's see where we. Okay, so where I was just talking about basically why atheists talk about religion, and when they say that we talk about religion too much and we're tedious, I think that he's missing the mark. He's aiming at the responders rather than the originators of the discussion. But anyway, so John Gray, the renowned English philosopher, is tired of the new atheists and considers their thinking shallow. The author is not a religious believer, but he insists that non-belief is far more strange and subtle business. This is what I'm talking about. He's an English philosopher. So, I mean, I see a lot of parochialism in this view. I wonder how much time he has spent amongst religious fundamentalists, and if he has difficulty seeing why people would have a desire to respond to that in particular.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, the fundamentalist question is a good one. I don't know what you're defining as fundamentalist, and I mean, the big question is how dangerous they are. A lot of times anti-theists will want to go to politics, and they'll claim, because religious people are against abortion, that makes them dangerous. And I don't know how to argue against that, because it's just it's more of a political question than it is a religious one.
Well, I guess the question is what motivates someone's politics, and a lot of times it is their religion.
I agree.
I mean, Donald Trump wouldn't have been elected if he didn't have the religious backing. Most of the evangelical Christians voted for Trump. That's a huge chunk of people that he pandered to. So this stuff does affect our elections, and thus our direction as a country.
Even if you got rid of religion, though, there would still be conservative and progressive and libertarian. Seems like those are naturally
Right.
occurring features.
True, but there's a pretty strong delineation between the religious conservatives, and the religious liberals. The conservatives tend to be way more religious, tend to be way more on the fundamentalist side. Now here's where I get people saying that I'm a conservative and I'm an atheist. Yes, I know.
Thank you. You got that in your last video.
Yes, thank you for the data point. I'll take note of it. You drop in the ocean. Thank you. But for the most part, conservatives are religious, and for the most part, the leftist side, I mean, that's part of the things that I made fun of in my cartoon. It's like when I say the left does not believe in a God. I mean, it's a parody of people who think that leftism is either godless or leads to godlessness. That's what I'm parodying. And people mistake that as like, oh, what are you talking about? People on the left believe in God, and there's people who on the right who don't believe in God. And it's like, yeah, I know. It's called a parody, But anyway, but the religion does definitely affect people's politics. I mean,
but it does for both good and ill. That's the problem.
Well, I guess then I would say that it does more for ill than good.
Right, and that's the question. That's the big question. Like, if you want to make the claim that the world will be a better place without religion, you kind of have to do the math on that stuff. And like I said in my tweets, I feel like evolution is kind of evidence that religion does more good than harm. Even if it's close, even if it's like 40% harm and 60% good, evolution is still going to favor that.
Evolution doesn't work toward a good or a bad, though. It just works toward
it's survival and reproduction.
Right. I mean, to me, that's kind of like treading dangerously toward a eugenics type argument, where
you said that before, and I didn't really understand that.
Well, we're talking. All right. There's all kinds of socially immoral things that we would consider immoral, that could very well be an evolutionary benefit. Rape, theft, murder, maybe could benefit one group, the other group, and you could use evolution to justify it. And I think that's reading into a natural process that it's like a naturalistic fallacy, basically.
So yeah, I understand the argument that you're making. You're right on the money. It can lead to groups warring against other groups. I would argue it does lead to groups warring against other groups. Part of the culture war that we're having is really conservatives versus progressives in a dispute, a conflict over resources, particularly the resource of these platforms, this digital space. It seems like we're fighting a culture war over this new territory that we've discovered. So I don't necessarily know. I don't know how to talk about this stuff, because it is, I would say, true in the scientific sense. I without being accused of the eugenics argument? How do I make my argument without being accused of that?
Well, you can't say that something is good or bad because the science says so, because the science has nothing to do with the morality of it. It's is ought problem. You can't
Yeah.
get an ought from an is.
Hume's guillotine.
So like yeah. So you're like you're. It seems like that's what you're doing, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm accused of this regularly. Maybe if I just lay it out, I think your ethics come in. There's like an ethics package that people have that produces a culture, and those cultures are competing against other cultures for resources and members. And the better ethics packages will gain more adherents and make those adherents more successful. And those ethics packages tend to win out over time. So I kind of see Christianity as being one of those ethics packages that has survived and reproduced over the centuries. And since it's such a costly behavior, it takes a lot of time and energy from people to engage in this religiosity. Since that is going on, I feel like the costly behavior has to be paying for itself in survival and reproduction, in reproductive fitness and resources. So that's the argument that I'm making. I would love to be able to separate it from the naturalistic fallacy. I guess I just shouldn't call it good, but I don't know any human being that wouldn't think my quality of life, having more resources, how they would characterize that as bad. I guess they would if it's coming at the expense of other groups. That's the key.
Well, you're talking about the success of an ideology, but if you're looking at current trends, Islam is going to surpass Christianity by the mid 21st century. So then are you going to start, saying that Islam's the way to go?
Well, isn't there two forms of it? I don't know Islam very well, so I don't often feel qualified to speak on it. But from what I do understand, isn't there kind of two breeds of Islam? Isn't there the honor culture breed of Islam that's in the Middle East, and then there's kind of a dignity culture, a form of Islam that's more progressive in the West?
Well, the same with Christianity. There's a million
Sure.
different denominations of Christianity. But what I mean by that is if you're basing something's worth on how successful it is, how successfully it perpetuates, well, I mean, Islam is doing better than Christianity. And I think we would both agree that, we don't want Islam taking over. Right?
I agree, yeah. Well, it depends upon what form of Islam it is, because if it's a neutered form of Islam that's like that is basically like modern Christianity. Modern Christianity is no longer throwing LGBT people off of buildings. If modern Islam is no longer throwing LGBT people off of buildings. The reason I don't never feel qualified to speak on Islam is because, first of all, I grew up in Christianity, so when I think of the things that are necessary for society, like forgiveness, I've pointed out, generosity, I've pointed out, I don't know that Islam fosters forgiveness or generosity, and I feel like different religions are suited for different environments. You're going to have a different religion in a low resource environment than you are going to have in a high resource environment. Low resource environments tend towards honor cultures, and then the people just use the religion to justify whatever honor culture behavior they participate in. But it's really the evolutionary principles that's driving the culture and not just the religion.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about Christianity, being neutered, I think that the success of Western civilization played a big part in that.
I agree.
Uh, Talk about a lot of Islamic countries are are struggling. So we see that their religion tends to be more extreme in those areas. Just as we've already pointed out, that religion tends to thrive where there is um, trouble, where there's strife, where people need religion, where people need something to turn to, than in places like the more comfortable Western world where religion is faltering.
So the question becomes, are those places faltering because of the religion, or are they faltering because of corrupt political institutions? And if they're faltering because of the corrupt political institutions, the religion is just being used to satiate people's difficulties in dealing with these corrupt institutions that they're surrounded with.
And the religion itself could be used as a tool.
Sure, it could be corrupt as well.
Yeah, I think, and Islamism itself is a mixture of the political and the religious, and that's one of the things that obviously both of us would be against. We don't want to mix religion and politics.
Were you raised Christian?
No, I grew up just totally secular.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, I never believed in God. My parents never brought it up. Yeah. But anyway, let's get on with the article. He says, where were we? He thinks we're shallow. Okay. Gray has written a new book called Seven Types of Atheism, revealing the surprising variety of perspectives among irreligionists. It also explores some of the old assumptions we make about ourselves and the world once we've decided to throw the idea of God in the garbage. I spoke to Gray about the wide range of ways in which to ponder your place in a cold and unfathomable universe. Okay, so his question is, you're quite hard on the new atheism of Richard Dawkins and others. What frustrates you about their way of thinking? Um, One thing I'd like to add, though, is this idea of calling things new atheism, which I don't like. I don't agree with, because it's still the same old atheism. What it is it's just now you're more allowed to talk about it without being, um, terribly stigmatized, without any kind of debilitating stigma that'll follow you around. Basically, cancel culture on steroids is what atheists used to have to deal with. Like as early as, I mean, as not as early, but as like late as the 80s, I remember, like, my grandfather was an outspoken atheist activist. Now, maybe you might think that's how I got influenced into this, but um, there was probably some influence there. But I was an atheist before I knew he was an atheist, so there's something to be said about that. But anyway, like, I saw how people treated him, you know, it was just awful. The death threats constantly, um, just awful. And he was before, we're talking about the 80s, before the term new atheist existed. And it was like in the 2000s that the term new atheist came to prominence, which I translate to mean atheists who have the audacity to audibly disagree with religious people. That's basically what I say. That's what new atheism is.
Well, Richard Dawkins famously did a TED Talk about militant atheism.
Uh-huh.
So I link the new atheism to that description Richard Dawkins gave of militant atheism. I agree basically with what you're saying, is that atheism has you can be outspoken about being an atheist now. Richard Dawkins encouraged people to engage in militant atheism, which really, I mean, I don't object to people saying that they're an atheist. I think my objection comes in where people start proselytizing, where they start saying the world would be a better place without religion, without much evidence on their side to substantiate that claim. I'm like an old school atheist. I want to stand under the banner of science and mean it. And a lot of times I see outspoken atheists denying a lot of science because they have this belief that the world would be a better place without religion. And there's a lot of science that gets in the way of that.
Well, the old joke. What's the old joke? A militant Muslim will blow you up. A militant atheist will tell you to read his blog. Right?
It's true. Yeah.
I don't like the word militant there, but I mean, the world, I think the world, here's our thing, is that the world is a better place when religion is gone, whether you put the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart. It's like, whether you think that it was religion causing the mess to begin with, or you just think that religion dissipated because the mess went away, when you actually have a better society, it's
here.
The reality of the modern world is that it's not going to be a religious society.
But if
there's your evidence.
If you're looking to solve the problem, though, like, let's look at some of the places where they're drowning in conflict and religiosity is high. If you're an anti-theist and you believe the world would be a better place without religion, and it's religion that's causing all of this strife there, which I've definitely heard various militant atheists make that argument.
In some cases it is true, in some it's much more complicated.
Well, I think it's always more complicated. I would say that the strife is normally from corruption. There's a small number of elites who are hoarding all of the resources, and everybody else is kind of living in squalor. And they adopt a high level of religiosity to deal with this great injustice that they're suffering in their lives every single day. So if the anti-theist comes in and says, your problem is that you've got too much religion in your life, when these people know, no, our problem is we have these elites that have their boot on our neck, and we can't get ahead in life because we're being subjugated, and we're only using religion to kind of deal with that constant daily injustice in the world. You come off looking like a total jerk. You're saying the one thing that gives you solace in the world is the problem, when it's not the problem.
Well, what about those religious people whose religion is a integral part of their tribalism? The very people who they're warring against are of a different sect, Sunni versus Shia, Christian versus Muslim,
Yeah,
and that's like a very important part of the conflict.
Yeah, it's
Jewish versus Muslim. The whole, I mean, look at Israel. The whole conflict is predicated on who is entitled to this land.
I still don't think.
Holy land,
I still think that the root of the conflict is the resources, not the religion. I think the religion is what people use when the resource conflict comes into existence. You can even make that argument in the U.S. If we have if the conflict we're having is over resources, The polarization may be different because we're a secular society, but the polarization is still going to be there. I would argue that the polarization in America is more this based around politics, based around progressive versus conservative, where in some place like the Middle East, it might revolve around Shia versus Sunni, but it's still the same thing. It's a resource conflict that different people are grouping up to fight other people for those resources in a sort of pragmatic way, and they're grouping along religious lines. I think that the religion just organizes the conflict. I don't think the religion is the root of the conflict.
Well, I mean, in many aspects, it is the root of the conflict. For instance, that particular location of Israel is that specificity in geography is entirely religious in nature. It's not about the resources of the land. It's about the religious significance of the land. And for instance, you engaging in this conversation with me, admitting you're an atheist, means that you would be at risk of losing your life if you visited any one of a dozen countries on this planet. If someone just simply played this video back to, the governing authorities, you can be killed for being a non-believer. I mean, I just see that. I see that as a problem that needs to be solved.
Well, I see this exact same problem here in America, though, with cancel culture. So, I mean, I don't see how it's any different. Well, you're trying.
That doesn't mean you're.
They're trying to destroy people's lives for not believing. If you don't believe in progressive orthodoxy, they're trying to end your life. How is that any different than if in a Muslim country, if you're not a Muslim, they try to end your life? You have to believe an ethics package wholeheartedly, or you're canceled or killed.
In one instance, they'll kill you. They'll chop your head off, or hang you, or torture you, and then kill you. And
no,
in
it's
the other,
heinous.
Complaining to your boss.
Well, I mean, people getting canceled, I don't think is. I guess yes, I would much rather live, but obviously, yeah, it's not as bad.
And
Still heinous.
I would argue that cancel culture itself was empowered by a conservative society, a society that that promoted capitalism, that promoted the free market, right? I mean, if somebody starts spewing the N word, and people are like, whoa, and they find out where he works, and they're like, wait, you want your company, you want this guy representing your company, and the company's like, whoa, this is going to lose us business, we better get rid of this guy. That's a capitalistic motive.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's cancel culture would not work without capitalism.
Okay. Do you want to move on?
Sure. So the answer to the question, you're quite hard on the new atheism of Richard Dawkins and others. What frustrates you about their way of thinking? So he says it's their idea of religion as a failed scientific theory of everything, a primitive science. And I would call that a very, I would call that a straw man, because, I mean, they never even come close to describing it as a scientific theory. They barely call it a hypothesis, which, I mean, technically it's a hypothesis, but a scientific theory. They most of the time they talk about it as if it's the antithesis of science, and certainly not as a failed scientific theory.
Well, they do. They do say that they do criticize the creation myth as something unscientific.
Right. Yeah.
But the purpose of the creation myth, was never to to be science, never to explain the creation of the world. It's just a metaphor.
Right, and that's what he goes on to say here. And I have a problem with that too, but I'll just read what he says. He says, when it comes to the Genesis myth, even the early Christian scholars said you mustn't read this as a literal rendition of fact. It's a mistake to confuse religious fundamentalists with the vast, rich tradition of religious life. Religion is not an explanatory theory of the world. It's a way of making sense of living in the world. And my problem with this is that he's conflating the people that atheists are actually responding to with people that they're not responding to. Like, just because I argue against a literal interpretation of the Bible, that doesn't mean that I believe that that's how it should be interpreted. That means I'm arguing against people who think that the Bible is a book of science. People like, like Kent Hovind, for instance, or Ted Haggard, or what the hell? What's the guy with the arc? So ridiculous.
Ken Ham?
Guy with the arc.
Is it Ken Ham?
Ken Ham, yeah. These guys are arguing like Genesis is a science text, and we're responding to that. When an atheist criticizes religious fundamentalism, we're criticizing religious fundamentalists. And
right.
To then turn around and say, what the fuck is wrong with you atheists, I think misses the point.
Yeah, that is a great point. That's a great point. That you're basically saying, no, we're arguing against people who are using religion as science, which I am too. Like, yeah, no, I disagree with those people as well.
Right. Okay, so we'll just move on to the next one. The other really widespread way of doing atheism these days is secular humanism. Why is it you think the humanists are misguided and are actually just repeating religious ideas? And he says, the whole idea of progress comes from monotheistic religion, from Christianity in particular, and from the post-millennialism that says Christ will return one day, but only after we improve the world. I mean, the idea that Christianity invented progress is, I don't agree with that. For those of you who don't know, post-millennialism says that Jesus Christ is going to return after 1,000 years of peace, and premillennialism is the literal interpretation of the Bible that says that Jesus Christ is going to return, and then there will be 1,000 years of peace. And this all comes from Revelation 20, I believe. And he's saying that the idea of progress comes from post-millennialism. So Christians are motivated to progress the world to a better place so that Jesus will return. But I see progress, the idea of progress, evidence of it in the pre-Christian world. Plato talked about the history of mankind's progress, and you have huge works of infrastructure like the Roman aqueducts took 500 years to make, from like 300 BC to 200 AD. So we're starting centuries before Christ and ending, before Christianity was even that big of a deal yet. This is a society that believed in progress, that believed that believed things could get better. Otherwise, they wouldn't have even bothered with these huge projects. They would have thought of them as impossible. You have agriculture starting 10,000 years before Christ. Tell a farmer it has to believe in progress, right? So what he's talking about is like the contrast between the Christian linear view of time versus the cyclical societies that believed that time was more of like a cycle. I wrote down a few of them: Chinese, Babylonian, Hindu, Greek, Roman, Confucianism, Taoism, even some Native Americans. So they view things as getting better and worse, better and worse, better and worse, whereas Christianity views things as beginning worse and ending better. And I think that it's simplifying it so that he's confusing, I think, the idea that we don't believe, or that we're behaving more like the Christians just because, you know, we believe that progress can occur within cycles of getting better and worse. You know, I still think that things can get, well, let me just read what he says. Okay, let's elucidate his thoughts a little more. The secular humanists have replaced the idea of God with the idea of humanity, an agent with a common set of goals that is gradually realized over time. Now, I've given examples as to humanity contributing with a common set of goals that are gradually realized over time. Before Christ, this happened all the time. Humanity is part of a story with redemptive meaning. So the secular humanists haven't shed a way of thinking that comes from monotheism. In the pre-Christian world, they never assumed progress would occur. History has no redemptive significance.
Yeah, it sounds like you're more read on this stuff than me. I don't necessarily know what he's talking about there.
He thinks that progress is a Christian. The idea that we can progress to a better world is a Christian thing, and I just don't agree with that. And his problem, see, this guy is more of an anti-theist than I am, because his problem is that we're still thinking too much like Christians. That's his criticism. His criticism is atheists are still thinking too much like Christians.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree that we are, but he's more of an anti-theist than I am, and he's criticizing anti-theists.
I mean, this is close to the progressive narrative, though, and the progressives are about improving the world. So, and aren't progressives predominantly atheist? So is he just saying that the type of atheist he's pointing out is a progressive?
Yeah, he's
secular humanists are progressives, right? Yeah, they're progressives, right?
Right.
Typically.
Yeah, they think that the world can get to a better place than it is now. And thank you, by the way, for whoever rated. Did somebody rate it? I'm sorry, I'm not paying enough attention to the chat on the new followers. There's so many new followers. Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. I'm sorry, I'm not paying enough attention. Oh, the serfs. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. But yeah, secular humanism sees a better future, right?
Yes.
It believes in the idea that we can improve ourselves, and this guy is kind of conflating that with the idea that, you know, it's like the Christian belief that, you know, God is going to, you know, come in and save us, and then, you know, everybody's gonna be better off. Well, he says, well, we're just replacing that with secular humanism. But I say, you know, what do you expect? Do you expect us to just fall into a deep depression and just lie down and die and expect that nothing can improve. Like, if I want the world to be better for my kid, does that mean that, oh, I'm acting religious? I mean, I disagree with that. I find that contentious.
Yeah, I guess I understand the argument that he's making, is that secular humanism is just stealing its ethos from Christianity. It seems to be, is what he's saying, which I agree with to some extent. I feel like, I don't know what secular humanists' position is on forgiveness. I don't know how they're working on getting forgiveness into the popular culture. That's generally my critique of secular humanism. Secular humanism is an ethics package, but I often think that it is just a copy paste of Christianity with none of the and a flat out rejection of any of the narratives that would facilitate that ethics package.
Well, there's no guarantees, though. In Christianity, you have guarantees. Mm-hmm. This is going to happen. It says in the Bible, this is going to happen, so that's going to happen, no matter what. With secular humanism, there's no guarantee. Secular humanism is, if you want a better world, then you have to be the one to do something about it. There's no guarantee. He seems to think that secular humanists believe that it's inevitable. And I don't think secular humanists believe that. I think from my experience, secular humanists absolutely realize that it can go to shit and the world can be ruined. And I think that we're vigilant about that. I think that part of the whole idea of social justice that everyone seems to have a problem with comes from the idea that people know precisely that things can go bad and go wrong, and that it's people who have to work to make the world a better place, and that we can't rely on some celestial father figure to make it all work out for us in the end. And I find that a fundamentally different worldview. I see a clear demarcation between Christianity and secular humanism. And I think that only a surface level examination of the two can find any sort of similarity. One puts the human destiny in their own hands and says, look, it's up to you. And the other says, hey, it's up to God, and it doesn't matter what you do. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. And you either get on board or, you get left behind, literally.
If secular humanism, though, is useful in helping people structure their lives, why are there so few secular humanists compared to so many Christians? I think there's 2.5, 3 billion Christians, and there's only 400,000 secular humanists.
So you're asking if it's what?
If it's helpful, if you're just conceptualizing religion as something people utilize to help structure their lives, that they feel, especially in America. America is a great sample because you've got 300 million Americans that have the freedom to be whatever religion they want. So technically, if secular humanism was a better religious system, a better way to live your life, a better way to succeed, a better way to be happy, you would think people would drop Christianity and move over to secular humanism. Why aren't they doing that in droves?
Do people always do what's best for them?
No, obviously not. But I mean, that's why the people
and also religion has a whole established infrastructure of indoctrination. People grow up being told, what their religion is pretty much from birth in many cases. I mean, it's a hell of a thing to get out of that. They have a 2,000-year head start, and we're talking about something in its infancy. It's like
But don't
we could have had this
parents?
conversation in the year. We could have had this conversation as a couple of Christians in the year 200. It's like there's not very many of us. Who are we to say that our way is better? Well, look what happened. They
Right.
took over the world.
Yeah. I would say through an evolutionary process. Um, if you have the numbers now, because I would argue there are people who are asking themselves, they were raised in a certain religion, and they think, did this religion work well for me? If the religion didn't work well for them, they're probably going to abandon that religion and not teach it to their kids. If the religion did work well for them, they are probably going to teach it to their kids. And that's kind
Well,
of the success path.
I don't think people look at it that way. If it
Hmm.
does well, good for them or not, because if people don't look at things in a utilitarian way like that. If they think it's true, it's true, and if they're not doing well, then they're going to attribute that to it being their own fault and not the fault of their religion.
Hmm. Okay. I
I,
disagree. I think people never want to blame them, never want to blame themselves. They always want to blame something else, some external force. It's never their fault. So I don't think people normally
well,
step up and say, "Oh, this is my responsibility." They're like, "I was raised religious. It ruined my life."
if they believe in God, I don't think that you can just turn that off all of a sudden because you don't like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I
You don't
believe
like
there is,
you don't
like,
like I kind of there's been plenty of times in my life when I wish there were a God, but I can't just start believing. I can't. You can't pick and choose. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You have to be convinced. You have to be convinced. You can't just decide to believe.
yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So I don't think right. So I don't think it's a matter of choice, really. Uh,
Do you
um,
believing in
let
God is
me.
different though than selecting a religion, because there are interfaith couples all the time that decide what faith they're going to raise their children in, and I imagine the conversations they have are kind of like a compare and contrast on how that ethics package treated them, how that community treated them.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I kind of don't. I don't really have much respect for people who God shop. I see that. Oh, I see that sometimes. People picking and choosing religions and stuff like they're going shopping. But I just don't think that's. I just think that's disingenuous.
Okay.
Uh, anyway, he says there's a. And another thing I wanted to say though about this progressive idea is that progressives tend to be on the left side of the political spectrum, right? And
Yeah,
and it's
definitely.
usually conservatives. It's usually the conservatives who are the religious ones, um, but he's not seeing it that way. He's seeing progressivism as being a religious idea, specifically a Christian idea, and I don't think that bears out in the politics of it either.
Well, no, he's
You
saying
know,
secular humanism is a progressive idea that was co-opted from
right?
religion.
Right, and I see that as more of a left wing ideology, and I see a desire to maintain the status quo, a desire to be conservative as being more of a religious right ideology.
Tradition, yes, is the right. The progressive side
Right.
wants change. the conservative side wants to preserve tradition, wants to preserve what's worked.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say what's worked. What has persisted, maybe. I don't know if I wouldn't say that it's worked. I mean,
well, I view conservatives as wanting a better world the same thing that progressives want. They just disagree on the strategy to achieve that.
but conservatives mainly want the world to stay the same, or to even go back to a world they believe used to exist, right?
I think conservatives want to build a just, safe society. I think conservatives are far more worried about society falling apart than progressives are.
Well, there's that fear that progressives want to change the world, and there's that fear that they could change it for the worse.
Yes.
I get that, sure. But if you consider the current situation to be untenable, then change is the only option.
Correct. And there are people that consider the current situation untenable. One of the things about democracy is if you have 51% of the population that feels this current situation is untenable, those people can change the situation democratically. They don't need to tear society apart. Right? I mean, they can change society at the ballot box.
Can they, though?
Well, I mean, if the democratic system is corrupted, obviously they can't. You know, if right. That's and part of the equation.
Well, I think the democratic system is corrupted in this country anyway.
There's plenty of arguments to make that it is corrupt. So, but I just, the thing that I always consider is that voter turnout is so tiny. I guess the argument is that voter turnout is tiny because there's no good candidates to vote for. I think this election is the perfect example of that.
And also, voting is deliberately made difficult, especially for certain groups.
Sure.
There's a lot of manipulation that goes on in the electoral process.
Tons.
Yeah. So, and even, I mean, we could argue all day about just the concept of democracy itself. I mean, it's, this idea of majority rule. I mean, obviously, we're not just a democracy. I mean, we recognize that there's certain rights. There's a republic. We recognize certain rights cannot be voted upon. I think that's obviously important, but we're kind of getting off the subject here.
There's a third kind of atheism.
So the did we do the third kind? Science has. There's a third kind of atheism. You identify faith in science. Isn't science something noble to believe in? Science has always been and always will be used by all sorts of people with different values. Many people have used scientism, the attempt to turn a bundle of scientific methods into a kind of gospel to justify racism, imperialism, or even genocide. It tends to embrace the dominant values of the time. People can't explain why science should embrace liberal values, though the assumption is often there nowadays. There's nothing in science that tells you to be kind or help the poor. Science is a set of methods. It tries to explain practical things, but it can't dictate values. And I would say that science, maybe I'm just saying this in a different way he is, but science can inform you of how to accomplish your of a viable way to accomplish a goal you're trying to achieve. It's not. It doesn't tell you whether or not your goal is a moral, good or wrong. But it is a methodology, and faith in science. I think that I do have faith in the scientific process to show me factual things about the world. I think it is a viable way to gain information about the universe. It has predictive ability. So I do have a certain degree of faith in the process. I do, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't look to it for values, though. I might look to it for ways to achieve certain values. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think of science. I think you can conceptualize science as an ethic. I read a book recently, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's about conceptualizing science as an ethic, and the ethic is the search for truth, for factual scientific truth, for materialist truth, and I do think that is an ethic. I kind of conceptualize society as a bunch of different teams working towards different objectives. And I think the scientific team truth, I would even classify myself as on that team, is a necessary component of society. But I think where the anti-theists get it wrong is it can't be 100% of the society. You need other competing teams working on different objectives. As human beings, I think we constantly want everyone to be on our team. We want everyone to be a Christian, or we want everyone to be an atheist, or we want everyone to be a pro-science, or we want everyone to be a Democrat or a Republican, because we feel safer knowing that we're surrounded by people who are our peers, people who agree with us. And it's an uncomfortable thing psychologically for humans to kind of interact with people who are on different teams. So we're really fighting against our nature to even develop a society like America, where we have, this live and let live attitude, even though people with wildly different opinions are interacting with us. So I think our nature finds our modern situation uncomfortable, but I do think that it produces the best results societally for us.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about, do you relate atheism, or at least a type of atheist, to scientism?
Yeah. There are definitely people who they've made science their ethic, and I would classify these people as people who believe that truth, scientific truth, factual truth, is always correlated with well-being. That, the more true things you believe, the more scientifically accurate things that you believe, the more happier and the more successful that you will be. I don't actually think the actual science testifies to that. I think you can believe wildly untrue things and be much happier and much more successful. You can also believe wildly untrue things and be completely destroy your life. Like, I don't want to say just believing untrue things is always good. Sometimes it's devastating. So the trick is, and kind of the way that I conceptualize religions, as being these ethics packages that have evolved. The ones that have managed to persist tend to be that if you believe these untrue things, you'll do better in a survival and reproductive kind of way, which, with all the problems that we've discussed about that, with the being linked to groups fighting other groups.
Mhm.
But I don't. The fear that I have with like adopting science as an ethic is if science is wrong, and say you believe things that science believes to be true but are untrue, you're technically believing untrue things, but you could be believing untrue things that are literally devastating for you because they're not necessarily this belief package that has been time tested through this evolutionary process.
Well, no, it's not the science that's wrong. It's the people who are wrong, who are claiming to speak for science.
Well, we
You know
could
what I
have
mean?
not enough information, though, obviously. Like, science is always making its best guess with the information that it has.
Right. It's never done. There's never like an end point where like the science is. I mean, that's it. I mean,
Correct.
practically. I mean, you can get there, I guess, but like, there's always just the best answer, not the right answer. I guess you would say. I mean, the
Well,
100% right.
let's take
Get
two
better and better answers. Um,
examples that might get me in trouble here, but I'll say it anyway. Like, there is a belief, a scientific belief, that gender is a spectrum, right? There is
mhm.
also there was at one time a scientific belief that the world was flat. If you believe that the world was
Why would you
flat,
classify those as? I mean, they're beliefs, but why would you classify them as scientific beliefs?
because they're beliefs about objective reality, they're beliefs about the physical world.
Is that what makes it? But is that what makes it science?
I think so.
Because
Yes,
science is just science is a methodology for determining
the nature of the
for
natural
for
world.
for gaining data for gaining data about the world. Right.
Right.
It's just a methodology. So if you gain data through that method, then I think you could call that a scientific data.
But
But
it's
if you just look at the world and see that it's flat and say, well, this is everything looks flat, so the Earth is flat. I mean, is that just an observation, or is that a scientific, is that scientific data? I don't know if I would call that a scientific belief.
Well, I'm just saying you can have a
You know what I mean?
belief about physical reality that's backed up by the data that science provides for you at the time. And
Right.
if the data point that you're using is, hey, it looks like it's flat out here, the Earth must be flat, you're missing a lot of data points, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying that
Yeah.
science takes those data points into consideration over time and then makes calculations about the natural world. We tend to uh, put faith in those calculations and structure our belief systems on those sorts of things. Like, for a long time, they didn't explore too far into the ocean because it was a fear that they would fall off the edge of the earth. Correct?
Um, I'm not terribly well. I mean, I don't know if they believe that. I don't know if that
Well,
was
you
just.
understand the concept, though.
I understand the concept, yeah, but I don't know that they believe that.
Now, you
I mean,
understand the
I
concept that if you
guess
believe
some of.
something, you understand the concept that your belief is going to drive your behavior.
Yes.
And an untrue belief can drive your behavior for positive or for negative, either way, depending upon what the belief is.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just saying, uh, I take that into consideration when I'm thinking about believing things.
Hmm.
I think the kind of atheists that he's talking about here are the atheists that believe that the truth value of a claim is correlated with the utility in a evolutionary sense and a happiness sense even with the
Yeah,
truth of that claim, and I don't believe that.
Yeah, I don't like to use the word to conflate truth with utility. You know.
So you don't believe that. So you believe the same as me, that I can believe totally false things, and I might that totally false belief might have more utility than the actual true belief.
Yeah, it could.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
why they're
it's
due that.
what do they call it? Pareidolia, right? That's basically where that comes from, right? It helped our survival to be paranoid and attribute a noise in the dark woods to a predator, even if it's not.
Mm-hmm.
That helped us survive. A
Sure.
false
Yeah.
a falsehood, could help us survive. I think that hell, I think God itself is a pareidolia of the universe.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
but I don't, and I do, see utility here and there for religion. I just don't think that. I just think that times change, and we need to change with them. I just don't think that it's the case anymore that religion has the utility it once had.
Why are you so persistent? I agree with you. Times change. Why is it
Yeah.
so important that people abandon their religion? Why is that an important thing for you?
Um, Basically, the negative motivations I've seen throughout my life have inspired me to speak
Mm-hmm.
out against it. The motivations against atheists, against LGBT people,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and couple that with the philosophical aspect that I just believe it to be false, and I want to convince people that it's not true.
Why?
Um, it's a hang up of mine. I guess I just don't want people to believe
Untrue
false
thing.
things.
Okay. See, that's why. This is why I think. This is why I think, like you must believe at some level that believing untrue things creates is somehow correlated with uh, the utility of the belief. I mean, or why wouldn't you encourage people to believe untrue things if you knew that it was going to make them happier and more successful?
I don't believe it because I believe that they can be happy and successful in other ways that
Mm-hmm.
are more grounded in reality, and therefore would better prepare them for the real world. Like I don't know. It's we see that people can survive and thrive without religion,
Well,
right?
when times are good, yes, but when times get tough, people turn to religion. They do. It's easy to
Sure.
proselytize anti-theism at the college. It's harder at the hospital.
Yeah. Um, but I've been there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there. I've been around the deaths of loved ones and never believed and made it through and coped. Um, and I know many others who have, and I just know it to be possible, and I know it's possible to go on and live a happy, successful life.
Yeah.
And I just don't think you need that falsehood in your life, which is also used to do some seriously negative things in the world. I just don't think that is needed, and I think we'd be better off without it.
Yeah. How do you feel about like people using drugs and stuff like that? Turning to alcohol to
Um,
drown their sorrows.
I think that for societal reasons, I want all that to be legal. I want people to choose themselves whether or not they want to do it. Drugs, alcohol. When you make these things illegal, it just creates um, crime monopolies. It creates violence and gangs. Um, but I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend doing it on a personal level. I certainly don't.
Well, you have a very liberal policy on drugs and alcohol. My policy as well, like individual choice. But you have a different
Mm-hmm.
policy on religion. If religion is, if you do conceptualize religion as kind of
I
the
believe in I believe in freedom of religion, absolutely.
okay, but you wouldn't.
So it is similar.
Yeah, I guess it is because you
It
would.
is similar.
Go ahead.
I would not recommend religion, but I do should be totally legal. So it's the exact same as my belief about drugs.
Right.
You know.
Well, I think. Well, I guess you would think of religion as doing. You think of religion as doing tangible harm in the same way that drugs do tangible harm. I think of religion as being helpful, and drugs being harmful. Even though drugs do offer some, satiation of depression and stuff like that, I would think that's why people turn to them. Obviously.
Yeah, I don't see the harm of drugs and the harm of religion as being similar. I just think that the harm of religion comes more from um, stigmatization of other people.
Yeah. Group
You
on
know,
group
you know.
conflict. I
Oh, you
don't.
kind of broke up there.
The thing about so you're saying the problem of religion is group on group conflict. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
So if the problem is group on group conflict with religion, what makes you think getting rid of religion is going to get rid of group on group conflict or even slow it down?
It will get rid of that avenue of it. People will have fewer reasons to justify their stigmatisms.
But
You know what?
if they're only using religion as a justification, then the conflict will still exist. I mean, there's group on group conflict in the animal world, and they don't have religion.
Well, if you look at you look at societies where there's less religion, like the ones I went through: Scandinavia, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Britain. There's less stigma against LGBT people because I think because there's less of that religious motivation.
Well, there's less conflict in general because of the wealth.
Wealth, education, prosperity. Yeah, yeah. But things like wealth and prosperity don't necessarily get rid of the stigmas, but and with education, I guess it depends on the type of education. I mean, you have countries like Saudi Arabia that are extremely wealthy, but they still have those very harsh stigmas.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, I don't know. I'm always hesitant to talk about these places that I know like three things about because I don't feel like I can accurately represent them. A big part of the culture is the political system, the socio-political economic system. And religion is definitely a factor
Mm-hmm.
there, but I always see the tangible uh, economic environment being the real source of what's going on. If there's conflict, if there's economic conflict, then people are just using their religion to to deal with that economic conflict, to conceptualize how to deal with it, uh, um, and looking for effective strategies to overcome it, to change it.
And I think religion plays a big part in motivating it. When you remove religion from the equation, that's one less reason. I mean, it could be many less reasons. There's so many different stigmas that religion can promote, where if you just pull that weed out by its root, you got rid of a whole bunch of bad shit
Yeah, but
that's going around.
the conflict is still going to exist, though. There's still going to be a small, if we're talking about the conflict, the general conflict that arises in society is a small group of people are hoarding all of the resources and the rest of society is living in squalor.
Mm-hmm.
That's generally the conflict that always arises. Always.
Well,
I don't. If that exists and you pull religion out, I don't see how that conflict is still is going to change. Like the whole idea behind religion is, you could argue if you're trying to, like inspire generosity in the society, you might be inspiring people who are in that class of people that are hoarding all of the resources to be more generous in giving towards the people who are not sharing in that prosperity. But without religion, how do you really motivate them to give up anything?
Why do you think that the conservatives tend toward the religious and the liberals tend toward the irreligious?
Because conservatives are more traditionalist. They conceptualize religion kind of the same way that I'm conceptualizing it, as an ethics package that works, that has proven itself over time.
Mm-hmm. And which side favors social programs, higher taxation, social safety nets, societal responsibility rather than personal responsibility, or focused on societal responsibility
The left.
over personal responsibility? Right. That's correct. The left. So that's your answer to your question.
Well, what was my question again?
Well, you were talking about how does without religion, how do you motivate the wealthy to kind of spread the wealth a little more, to kind of share with the group that is being deprived?
Right.
And with the right, it's just kind of like every man for himself,
Well, the right,
you win or
statistically, the right gives more to charities and church and that sort of thing, and the left gives less. But you're saying that the left is in favor of raising taxes, so that is a stand-in for the generosity of giving to your church. You're saying you can advocate for social programs as a stand-in for actually giving to a church. Or
when you're talking about income inequality, is essentially what you're talking about. And the left has definite policies that are designed to mitigate that.
Yes.
Through education and through taxation. That's how they try to kind of equalize the playing field, is by providing for the poor and taxing the wealthy more than they would tax the poor, a progressive scale. And well, anyway, I feel like we're getting way off topic.
Yeah, let's move on to the next one. Want to?
All right.
How long do you want to go? I think you're approaching your 2-hour mark, so I don't want to keep you forever, obviously.
Oh, it's all right. Yeah, it's all right. I'll see if I can finish this article up.
Yeah, let's do it.
The fourth kind of atheist is the kind who turns politics into a kind of religion. Does this kind of zealotry help explain things like the French Revolution, the rise of Bolshevism and Nazism? I'll give him the French Revolution and Bolshevism, but I won't give him Nazism. There was a lot of Christian Nazis. Just Nazi Germany was like 90% Christian, and obviously fascist Italy was Catholic. I mean, I don't understand why it includes Nazism as atheistic.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But he says the millenarian religious movements of the late Middle Ages expected a new world to emerge after a period of catastrophic conflict. I mean, isn't that kind of what happened? For modern revolutionaries, it's humanity that brings in a society different from any in history. Again, isn't that kind of what happened? But both share the myth that history ends with a far better world. I don't know of any atheists who believe that. Curiously, a version of this belief gripped liberals after the fall of communism. They failed to recognize that what has been gained can always be lost because of the flawed nature of the human animal. The thinkers of the ancient world understood you always have these cycles of improvement and barbarism. So he's saying that there's a kind of utopian atheist who denies this reality, and I've never seen an atheist like that. I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, the fourth kind of atheism is a kind who turned politics into a kind of religion. Does this kind of zealotry help explain things like the French Revolution? Yeah, I don't have much of a comment on that. I mean, I do think there are people, once you take religion out of the equation, that do kind of turn politics into their religion in the same way that I'm talking about the moral psychology thing. People innately want to belong to something bigger than themselves. So a lot of times, if there's not belonging to a church in someone's life, they turn to belonging to a political party or a political organization. I think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily think that's what he's riffing on here. I haven't read his book, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I just don't see what he's talking about here. I know that sometimes people like to play it fast and loose with the word religion until the word becomes meaningless. Any group getting together with common interests is suddenly called a religion, and I don't think that's a good thing to do. I think religion has a very specific meaning.
Do you believe in secular religions, though?
Secular religions,
or I guess
isn't that a kind of like a contradiction?
No, I guess non-theistic religion is really what I mean. A religion that doesn't believe in God.
Right. Like pantheism or Buddhism.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know. To call those religions, I guess technically Buddhism is classified as a religion.
So it's interesting to just, so you specifically classify religion as like a God belief. That's something essential for you for calling it a religion. That's cool. That makes sense. You want to move on to let's move on to God haters. That's probably the one we should have started with.
This one I think can be thrown out wholesale.
Oh, really?
I mean, it says, yeah, of course. All right, let's just read it. He says, let's move on to the God haters. These atheists seem to be so obsessed with evil that they actually still have some sort of belief in God. Okay, so they're not atheists. That's why I say that one's very simple. Right? Just
totally.
Toss them out. They're not. So he says his answer is the existence of evil in the world is a mystery. No, it's not.
Yeah, not people really. Not so much.
Yeah, people are selfish. people care about themselves more than others. I mean, that's where evil comes from. The existence of evil in the world is a mystery.
That's funny.
Christians have come
Did
up
did you
with.
were you oh, sorry, I thought you were saying that yourself. Go ahead, continue the article.
Oh, yeah, he says the existence of evil in the world is a mystery. Christians have come up with fancy arguments for evil, about free will for humankind, and so on, while others just accept the mystery. I mean, I don't think free will is even meant to explain evil. It just means that you have the ability to choose to do evil, but it doesn't explain the reason for the existence of evil. But anyway, he
You
continues.
said selfishness,
If you're
though.
an
That's why.
atheist and you're
Hold on a second. That's why I stopped you, because
what?
you were editorializing. I couldn't tell if it was in the article or not. You said selfishness
Yeah,
is related to evil.
right. Yeah.
Okay, I think we agree on that.
That's you say what?
We agree on that. Selfishness is related
Oh,
to evil. Yeah.
oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, because he says it's a mystery,
Yeah, it's
and
not a
I don't
mystery.
think it is a mystery.
I don't either. I totally disagree with him on this one.
Yeah, if somebody does something, that's evil, and it's also illegal, and they get arrested for it and go to trial and everything, one of the primary concerns is the motive, and that once you learn the motive, it's no longer a mystery as to why they did it.
Yeah.
Um, there's a definite logic to it. But anyway, he says, if you're an atheist and you're interested in evil, it's a short leap then to say there must be some element of evil in God, or the very idea of God is evil. The God hater is one who can't accept God because of all the evil in the world and then comes to hate that God, but it's actually another iteration of monotheistic thought. And the final sentence there is kind of like an admission that this isn't even atheism, it is theism. Um, Now, the character of God, which I believe to be fictional, I think is an evil character.
Oh my God! Here it comes.
Like look at the book of Job, where he's making a bet with the devil that he can break this loyal servant of his, and he kills his family and gives him boils and everything. I mean, and in the Bible he kills babies, for crying out loud. I mean, he's an evil character, but like that has no bearing on my belief. Like I don't. That's not why I disbelieve in the character, and that has nothing to do with the evil I see in the world, which I attribute to human beings. I don't attribute that to God at all. And I think where he's getting mixed up is with the atheists who use the problem of evil to argue against God, because they're saying that it's all a hypothetical. Not that God is at fault for this evil, but that if there is a God, it goes all the way back to Epicurus. If is God all powerful, then he can stop. Then why doesn't he stop evil? And if he is all uh, loving, or benevolent, then basically, if he is,
I know the argument that
I'm
you're
I'm I'm,
making.
but,
Yeah.
I'm butchering the
Yeah.
argument because I'm just now coming off the top of my head, and I have a million other things going through my head. But um,
The argument, I think, is
if
if God is all powerful and doesn't intervene to stop evil, then he himself is evil. Something to that
yeah, or
effect.
if he's all powerful and all good,
Yeah.
then we should expect him to step in. You know,
Yeah. I know that argument from my obnoxious atheist days.
Um,
What's going on in the chat? I noticed there's this little ad on the side. Do you see that ad? A reminder: internet atheists fucking suck. It's like some other article. I was thinking, I wonder if you're in that article. Have they ever done an article on you in Vice?
no. The Independent.
I mean, I see T.J. Kirk in there.
Yeah.
I don't have your chat up, so they're probably screaming at me, but I don't see any of their messages. How's the weather over there?
Problem in theology, problem of philosophy that arises in any view. Okay. God is almighty, God is perfectly good, and evil exists. That's the problem. Well, all right. Anyway, this is basic stuff that I'm fucking up, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But
it's okay.
The stream is. I'm looking at the stream right now.
Mm-hmm.
If he's all powerful but unwilling, he is malevolent. If he's all loving but incapable, he's impotent. If he's both willing and able, then whence cometh evil? If he's neither willing nor able, then why call him God? That is the exact argument I was thinking of, Irish. Thank you very much for posting that. I appreciate it.
Sounds like a good God hater there. Sounds like he's classified himself.
And the argument from natural evil is stronger since there's no free will defense to it. Not that the defense was any good. Yeah, like natural disasters, animals dying in a forest fire. Like there's no human interaction there to blame for anything. It's just suffering. It's just needless suffering. And when you talk about a benevolent God that would create such a world where there's needless suffering. Anyway. But anyway, to sum up the God hater section, this is not an atheist. Mm-hmm. If you believe in God, I don't care if you love him or hate him. You're a theist.
Yeah, I think he could be. Like I said, I haven't read his book. I think he could be talking about the people who say that God is like the dictator in the sky, the evil dictator in the sky. Like they conceptualize God as being this evil idea, this authoritarian.
Mm-hmm.
Which I do hear people making that argument. So you want to move on to the next one?
And a lot of times people mistake atheists who are speaking hypothetically as if they're, talking about God. Well, we're talking about the character, that we.
Yeah.
But anyway, the next one is, let's talk about the sixth strain of atheism. You look at atheism without any faith in progress. Is it fair to say this is the most vigorous kind of atheism? He says, yes, I would say so. I use the example of the novelist Joseph Conrad. His atheism completely rejects the idea of progress, and yet he still admires human self-assertion in the face of a kind of bleak situation that cannot be overcome. The thinker George Santayana is someone who was impressed by the beauty of religion but didn't want it or need it for himself. They rejected the idea of the cosmos being rational. He likes this form that doesn't.
This is probably the clearest for me. I think he's talking about the nihilists.
Yeah. Rejects the idea of progress, and yet he still admires human self-assertion in the face of a kind of bleak situation that cannot be overcome. I am of the opposite opinion. I see that as being more theistic. He sees that as being less like monotheism, and I see that as being more like monotheism. Because to call it a bleak situation, an atheist believes that there's no God and no afterlife, right? So there's no ultimate meaning, and when you die, and the universe eventually will end in heat death, and there will be no more, and you will be no more, and the world will be no more, and that's it. That's the end, and that's the bleak situation. But I see,
Depressing.
yeah, I see that focus on the ultimate end as being more religious in nature, whereas I'm focused more on the present and the next generation for my children. I believe in progress on a short term. Like, I'm not concerned about 10,000 years from now. I'm concerned about right now. I'm concerned about the next 50 years, for my kid. I want and know the world, it's possible for the world to be a better place. So I want to do what I can to try to help make it so. And I'm not concerned with this religious ultimate significance that this form of atheism he seems to admire so much is concerned with. I don't give a fuck about ultimate significance. I care about the here and now.
Right. But do you think he has a point about nihilists? Do you think nihilism is a problem to deal with?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't had many. I don't know. I haven't had a problem with nihilists. Um, I think that they're probably as concerned with ultimate meaning as the religious are.
Well,
They just go in the opposite direction.
yeah, I worry about the nihilism stuff just because it's such a terrible situation to be in, just to have no hope whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. And my concern is about, just, it'll sound trite, but making the most of life while we have it, while we're here, because I believe it to be very limited. I don't believe it's going to go on in an afterlife, so I um, want to
Mo-
make it as best as I can while I'm here and while the next generation's here, for them,
Yeah, I
and
think.
hopefully they can do the same.
Do you want to move on to the next one?
Sure.
We're
He
so
says
close.
you finish with the mystical kind of atheism. It sounds almost like people who have a big drug experience and talk about the oneness of everything. Well, he says, it's a radical kind of atheism that asserts that the nature of reality is ineffable. It can't be embodied in words. Schopenhauer thought that the ultimate reality of things was spiritual, but we couldn't really grasp it with our reasoning. He didn't have any need for a creator God, but actually, he isn't so far from certain traditions in mysticism and different religions. Some types of mystical religion come close to atheism in their understanding of God as unimaginable. Um,
Sam Harris.
and I think he kind of gets it wrong when he says comes close to atheism in their understanding of God as unimaginable. Which seems to be a contradiction. Understanding of God is unimaginable. No, I don't know. That's a funny way of wording it. But he's talking about igtheism, not atheism. It's igtheism that believes that God is you can't define God. God is incoherent. The very concept of God is incoherent and unimaginable. That's igtheism, not atheism. So I think he's kind of making a mistake there.
I don't know what you're saying. Egg theism?
Ig, I-G.
Oh, igtheism. Okay, I
I-T.
gotcha.
Yeah.
This describes a bit Sam Harris, though. Like, Sam Harris is all into the Buddhist teachings, and he's got a mindfulness app, and he's always talking about psychedelics, and so this does seem a little bit like Sam Harris to me. I haven't read this guy's book. I might read this guy's book, but I don't think, like, I feel a 50-50 in agreeing with him and disagreeing. Like, I conceptualize atheists through the lens of moral psychology. So there are certain things that and irreligious people find disgusting about religion, and they tend to break down in different groups by what they find disgusting about religion. Like, obviously, feminists find the patriarchal aspect of religion disgusting, so therefore they become atheists. Different people become atheists for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
He says, the interviewer says, so the last two are the kinds of atheism you most admire. And he says, yes, they're the ones I like the best, in that they are the most rigorous in stepping outside of a monotheistic way of thinking. So he is very anti-theist in this. They're complaining about anti-theists,
Mm-hmm.
but his main criticism is that they're not anti-theist enough.
Well,
there
I
are
make
many
it.
kinds of atheism.
Go ahead, finish it off.
Okay, I'll just give it the last couple sentences. I think you're an atheist if you don't need the idea of a creator God, but if you really want to step outside of monotheism, I think these sorts of ideas are where you'll get to. So he wants to get away from monotheism so badly that he criticizes these other types of atheism for not getting away from monotheism enough, is what he's saying.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting article. I think I disagree as much as I think I disagree with most of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too.
I have a way different way of looking at atheism and anti-theism. I just think it's more helpful to think of what is the goal of the community. What is it that the community has united to change about society or the world? What are they trying to sustain even? I mean, different communities form for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. I got you.
We should do the video that got you in trouble sometime. Well, I don't know how much trouble did it get you in.
Hang on, let me. Okay, I've just got a bunch of texts, but anyway, Joe, I hear you, man. I hear you. Hang on a minute. You asked when you think we should do a stream.
Yeah, I talked to PSA Sitch, the guy that I do my Sunday streams with, and we thought it might be fun to have you on to watch a video with us. I know that you're a super hardcore progressive. Would you describe yourself as a hardcore progressive? It seems like, just as an outsider, it seems like you are, but I don't know how you describe yourself.
Oh, I never like describing myself.
Okay.
I don't. I just don't like, labels, but so I just let people draw their own conclusions based on the things I advocate and say, I guess. But because I mean, I guess most of the views I advocate are progressive, are left-leaning views. They're the ones that I don't believe in. I just don't talk about. I don't actively speak against them, but I don't talk about them either.
Yeah, I get that. Well, I'll go ahead and sign off, and I'll let you interact with your chat. It sounds like you have some questions for them to answer, but if you want to come on our show, just let me know, and we'll pick out a video. And if you want to, I guess, I had talked to you about doing something on my channel as well, so we'll do that as well.
I mean, we could talk about my video if you want, or Styx's response or whatever.
Yeah, that could be fun
with me.
All right, should I let you go?
Sure, that's fine. But it was good talking to you.
Yeah. Do you have any? I mean, I don't want to jump off. If you have any like closing thoughts or anything.
Oh no. I think that we didn't disagree as much as I thought we would.
That's probably bad for your chat.
It is. I think they want more blood.
Well,
I'll be harder on Joe. Joe wants to talk to me about racism, and I think we disagree very strongly on that topic.
There are things that we disagree on. I find it easier to go harder on people that I have a friendly relationship with, so I try not to get too argumentative until I know somebody. Like the reason I'm convinced my show with PSA Sitch is successful is because PSA Sitch and I are such good friends that we can really fight in front of people, and they can enjoy it in the blood sports way that people enjoy people fighting on the internet. But at the same time, they know ultimately that we're going to walk away as friends, and that allows them to enjoy it just a little bit more. I think the problem with blood sports is that really you're just building an audience of psychopaths in the end, because like you got to be some kind of psychopath to want people to literally destroy their reputations and their relationships over petty internet drama. Like, it's fun to watch people argue. I like watching people argue. I like internet drama as much as the next guy. But I like knowing that the people arguing aren't going to, like, try to cancel one another. So
I see.
That's kind of my thoughts on the topic.
Yeah.
But it seems like you and I kind of get along. So maybe that's in our future. Maybe we can argue. I know that I argue. I get along with Noel Plum too, so I can argue pretty vigorously with Noel Plum and still know that I don't have to pull my punches with Noel. So
I see. Yeah, I like Noel. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah. Do you get along with Noel?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
had him do a cartoon with me.
I remember. He messaged me. He was totally excited about being in your cartoon. You immortalized him.
Yeah. Yeah. He's one of the few people I actually, made his character look like him.
Yeah, that's funny. That's awesome. All right. Well, this is to be continued. I'll let you talk to your chat. You take care. Have a good one.
Okay, you too. It was good talking to you.
Take care, man.
All right. Bye.
Well, first of all, if you don't have a purpose, it isn't that your life becomes neutral in a meaningless sense. It's that your life becomes characterized by unbearable suffering. Because the baseline condition of life is something like unbearable suffering.